What we're going to be examining today is a story that I wish I would have broke, but that was done by Eric Van Duzen on the fact that the Michigan State Police Crime Lab or Forensics Division has been using tests with flaws in it at least since 2019, because I have another letter here from Eric that has affected thousands of people, or potentially thousands of people, who may have just had CBD in their blood, but somehow were flagged for THC. And so obviously that's a bad thing. And so what we're going to do is have Tom Lavigne join us from Cannabis Counsel. He's going to talk about the legal aspects of it. And then we're going to have Rick Thompson do the headlines right now. Let's get started. Hopefully we can bring in Dan Sparrow here in a moment. But go ahead, Rick.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Hello again, everyone. This is the Cannabis News with Rick Thompson on 420 Post. Let's begin. Well, the biggest story of the week is that Michigan State Police finally admitting they cannot tell the difference between THC and CBD in your bloodstream, meaning they've been convicting people for THC crimes based on false pretenses for many, many years. Criminal defense attorneys have said this before. Lab technicians have said this before. I have said this before. The state police's zeal to maintain the criminal status of THC has led them to violate the public's trust more than once. And this latest revelation may be the most consequential one yet. How many people have been convicted of driving under the influence of THC who claim to never have smoked a joint before? Lots of them. There are people who operated a motor vehicle causing injury or death where the MSP held a false positive THC test over their heads, and prosecutors demanded harsh plea deals or long prison sentences. I interviewed Eric Van Duzen yesterday. He's my longtime friend, the independent journalist who broke the story. He says the MSP is not revealing which case or what scientific study initiated this reversal of policy regarding THC blood tests. But we do know the legal community is up in arms, and they're searching through old cases to see what may have been improperly prosecuted and which cases may qualify for a summary dismissal. Now, this is a live story, and it's changing all the time, so stick with 420 Post for more details. Now, here's a rule I learned at an early age in Flint, Michigan. If you don't want a union coming to your store, treat your people right, pay them well, and offer a secure long-term work environment. Apparently, that's why workers at Loom and Monroe have opted to form a union. There just doesn't seem to be any of those three things at Loom anymore, if ever there was. The vote to unionize was taken August 26th, but the effort to form that union came months before. The team is enrolled in the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. They claim this won't be the last Loom location to adopt a pro-union stance either. Loom advertises themselves as the state's largest cannabis company and has a history of what might be considered to be anti-union efforts in the past. So here's a wishing well to all those who voted to embrace representation in the face of corporate pressure and threats. Well, House of Dank and Jars Cannabis were both dealt big legal blows yesterday when a federal judge dismissed their separate lawsuits against the city of Detroit over the way cannabis business licenses will be awarded. The Dank lawyers said it was unfair that not all medical marijuana business licensees will get a recreational cannabis business license. The judge said, too bad. The Jars lawsuit claimed the scoring process was biased in favor of local ownership and that violated the MRTMA's competitive licensing process clause. But the judge said, since everybody can apply at the same time, there is no intentional bias in that scoring process. The MRTMA allows local communities to develop their own scoring rubric, but there may be a cause of action once licenses are actually awarded. In a true got more money than we need fashion, both House of Dank and Jars are contemplating appeals to these rulings by the judge. Detroit, however, they're not going to wait. The lawsuits prevented the city from beginning that licensing process they had planned to launch on August 1st. They're already jumping in to plan a new launch date. Limited license types, including cannabis retail, micro businesses, temporary event licenses, they'll be issued just as soon as the city can legally pump them out. Now, final story. Last week, our own Dan Sparrow ripped up the failed cannabis event Saturnalia in Muskegon, but now an article from Channel 13 backs up those claims Dan made about slow or no pay to vendors, poor attendance, lack of promises fulfilled, and the collateral damage to the industry and the people who invested time and money to participate. WZZM TV 13 interviewed a non-cannabis foods provider who lost her butt on this failed event as she prepared for the crowd she'd been told would attend, only to find a poorly promoted event with low attendance and broken promises. The station interviewed another attendee who had paid for VIP treatment, but ended up with nothing more than warm bottled water and Pop-Tarts instead of catered infused food that they had been sold on for the event. WZZM named Michael Webster as the culprit behind the failed cannabis event. And of course, he tried to slide responsibility onto someone else. That's what they do. He blamed a promoter he labeled as, quote, an unscrupulous marketing company, end quote. WZZM warns its viewers that the unreachable Webster has another event planned for the area this fall. It's called Falling Leaves. Muskegon may have the last say on if that event ever gets off the ground, but the bottom line here is not everything green is money, and not every wisp of smoke is from a good joint. Be careful who you roll up with, people, or you could see setting yourself up for a very big loss. And that's it for the Cannabis News with Rick Thompson on 420 Post. Back to you, Mike.
All right. Thanks very much, Rick. We're still trying to get Dan Spiro dialed in, so we'll wait, hopefully get him later in the show. But right now, let's go to Jamie Cooper with those. And I know there's a slug of events coming up, so she's going to fill that 5 minutes up, I'm sure, right?
Of course, of course. Yeah, like Rick talked about the Falling Leaves Festival. That was on my list, and because allegedly it's still happening. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because they are definitely getting the organizers of that event are getting a lot of backlash still. And, and there's a DJ that I work with. Her name is DJ Prim. If you've been to a Cincy night or a Cincy event, there's a good chance that you have heard her perform. She was a part of that event, and I felt so bad because she was hired to come in and perform and be the DJ for that event. And a lot of people gave her a lot of backlash as well. So please do her a favor and go give her a like on social media. She did lose some likes due to her being a part of that event, but she kind of got caught in the crossfire. So, but events are definitely dying down. It's Labor Day weekend. I'm not sure if there's any big events happening this weekend. I'm going up north to spend time with the family and say my farewell to summer. But September 8th, which is next week, the Mid-Michigan Young Professionals Group will be hosting a networking event in Lansing. If you are 35 or under, I highly recommend you go. If you are over 35, you can still go. Just bring a couple of 35 or younger friends when you do go. And then our next on my list, I have Goats of Cannabis. September 17th, Goats of Cannabis. It's a festival in Cassopolis. It's at the Cassopolis Fairgrounds, and I'm super excited to see how that event goes. Burner is going to be a headliner. Redman's going to be there. Trick. Sounds like it's going to be a pretty good turnout. They have a cup involved in that, and so shout out to Sunset Coast and everyone that's going to be a part of that event. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go check it out as well. October 1st, so we're getting into the leaves changing type of time frame. October 1st, up in the UP in Marquette, Higher Love is going to be hosting a fall festival. I don't think it's anything too huge, like a licensed festival, but they're going to bring together several cannabis brands and host an event. Then October 7th and 8th, also in Marquette, is Camp Cannabis. Sublime is the headliner for that event. It's going to be a camp out type of event. Sounds like fun and a first of its kind. I'm not sure if there's, other than Hoxeyville a couple of weeks ago, I'm not sure if there have been any other camp out type of event situations. So, and I'm sure up in the UP, it's beautiful in early October. And then October 13th, Cincy, we are going to be hosting our Potluck and Pamper Party, Women of Cincy Potluck and Pamper Party. This event is just bringing women that work in cannabis together, and we have some fun, listen to music, eat some great food. Nothing beats an old-fashioned Midwestern potluck either. And I tell you what, last time we had so much food. So if you're a lady, definitely join us for that event. I'll have information on registration in the next few days available. And then November MJ BizCon will be November 16th or 18th. I'm definitely going to be going to that. On the 16th, since we will be hosting a party at the top of the Stratosphere. This will be the 3rd year that I've hosted this event, and it's so much fun. You get a wristband to ride the rides if you want. It's an open bar. It's a buffet of amazing food. So definitely put that on your calendar if you're planning to go to MJ BizCon in November. And then Black Friday is November 25th. And of course, Cincy is going to do one of our Black Friday grab bags. So mark your calendars. Make sure you stop by one of your favorite dispensaries that morning and grab yourself one of those. They are packed full, about $300 worth of product or so. And then December 1st is our next scheduled Cincy night. We were going to have the event in September, but everybody and their dog decided to host events as well. So we actually ended up moving ours to December. We're going to host it in Lansing December 1st. It's going to be Cincy Presents a Frosty Affair. And we're going to do a toy drive with it and do something really great for the community and some of the families in need in our state. And we're going to be working with Sons and Daughters United to make sure that those toys go into the right hands this holiday. That is all I have. Was that 5 minutes, Mike? Maybe?
Close enough. We'll take
Jamie, what about Neon? You guys were going to do Neon Jungle. What happened to that?
We're moving that. We're just rescheduling that. We're not going to call it Neon Jungle. We're going to do a holiday theme party instead. Everybody has events, and in a market where a lot of people are cutting their marketing budgets, I just didn't want to compete, to be honest. I mean, our Cincy nights are becoming, we're forced to do them licensed for sales and consumption, and insurance cost is incredibly high. And, and I felt it was in our best interest if we just moved it to December. And I'm actually really, really excited about doing a holiday party. I've always wanted to do one and, bring our community together.
Okay. That Cincy bag is great timing too, because I'll be with the family on Thanksgiving, and me, I'm the candy man that shows up, and all my nieces and nephews are very happy, as if they need another reason to take a nap after the turkey, right? So anyway, all right. I'm going to read a little bit of this. Actually, I didn't do the reporting on this, but Eric Van Duzen did. And he posted a letter this morning that came from Jeffrey Nye, Director of Forensic Science Division, Michigan State Police. Bores right in on the topic. By now, I'm sure everybody's heard about this, and Rick mentioned it in his headlines. But the actual number of people identified, let me read this. I'm just going to read it directly from the letter from the state police. After further review, we now believe that cases potentially impacted by this finding include those occurring on or after March 28, 2019, where the alleged violation is based on the findings of THC alone, and there is insufficient evidence of impairment, intoxication, recent use, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the number that they have identified as cases that may be impacted by this, whatever you want to call it, mess up in the lab, 3,250. That's a sizable number. Let's bring in Tom Lavigne right now to kind of pick it up from there. Go ahead, Tom, unmute. So sure. 3,250 cases that the MSP is actually acknowledging. It could be more, could be less, but yeah, that's a real mess, right?
Yeah, it sure is. I also saw that letter. I guess I would have to refute that. I think there's more cases. They're pointing to a March 28th, 2019 date, indicating that that's when industrial hemp became legal. But actually, our ballot initiative made it legal, and that became effective December 6th, 2018. However, over and above that, really, these false reports swayed juries and judges alike to believe that the defendants had the intoxicating cannabinoid in their system. So, whether industrial hemp was legal or not, the impact upon the criminal cases actually predate when industrial hemp became legal here in Michigan. I mean, the standard was always, whether they're intoxicated and whether they deserve to suffer criminal penalties because of the undertaking, the driving, and perhaps sometimes even causing death in an accident, for example. For the state toxicology lab to testify in front of the jury that this individual had THC, the intoxicating cannabinoid, in their system when really they didn't, is prejudicial. Whether it's before or after December 6, 2018, in my opinion. There were certainly CBD products out there, and people were consuming CBD going way back, early in our medical marijuana history.
Yeah, let's just for with this audience, I'm sure they know what CBD is and the difference between THC. But let's talk a little bit about that, just so there's a clarification. CBD, of course, is the medicinal side of the plant, but there's probably an official definition. Why don't you talk a little about that, Tom?
Sure. Yeah, there's actually lots of cannabinoids that make up the cannabis plant, and CBD is clearly not intoxicating. Many of the others are not intoxicating as well. The only one that's really been identified as intoxicating is THC, and that's been the emphasis on these criminal prosecutions. So really the presence of any of the other cannabinoids have not been found to be a cause of intoxication. Now, the CBD actually converts into THC when the laboratory applies this chemical reaction as part of their analysis. And that's the problem. So it could be an instance where it's purely a CBD isolate with no THC in it, and they might have been taking it for their seizure condition or whatever condition they might have been applying that to, with no intoxicating effect, and yet they were being treated as though they have THC in it. So I think this number, the 3,250 cases since March 28th, 2019, is actually a low number. And I think the date is wrong because it became, industrial hemp became legal here in Michigan prior to that through the ballot initiative. And there was even a prior act. Remember, Steve Sharp had marshaled through the legislature
2014
legalization, yeah. And that goes way back to 2014. So actually, that's the earliest date. But in any event, even prior to that, ever since 2008's Medical Marijuana Act, the mere presence in our blood has been illegal to charge people, patients, with the mere presence of cannabis in our blood, pursuant to the case law that fleshed that out. So I'm thinking, this could go back the 20 years that they've been giving these false positives, according to the interview by Eric Van Dusen with the chief toxicologist, Dr. Frank, with the Michigan State Police Forensic Division. So he might have been more accurate when he pointed back, that they've been doing this for over 20 years, namely using this chemical assay as a reagent as part of the analysis dropped this chemical onto the CBD, and that was causing it to convert into THC. And they just recently discovered this. I guess they ran 3 samples, and it included the case where it was just CBD. It also tested positive for THC. So it's a big problem. These cases should be reopened, especially the ones, where there's serious incarceration, where there's cases in which, maybe vehicular accident where somebody has ended up deceased, and they're sitting there in front of a jury, and the lab results are put in front of that jury to say, oh, he was, high on THC, and that's why you should convict him of negligent homicide or whatever the charge might be. So this could be some really serious cases that have been impacted.
Okay,
And let's
Rick?
remember too that
Now, if there's other evidence in these cases and the guy was zigzagging down the road and maybe he had other substances in his system, that's another matter. But to the extent it was just CBD being mistook as THC, those cases should be reversed for sure. So it's quite a quandary that we find ourselves in. And I
Rick?
think I commend the Michigan State Police for coming forward with this. I just wish it would have happened sooner. You'd think these quality control tests would be part of any ISO certification or any accreditation. Should have vetted this out sooner than this, given the gravity that these testimonies have in a court of law and the impact it could have on people's lives, including incarceration.
Okay, Rick,
So-
you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Tom, the prevalence of CBD products that are not in the regulated market is just everywhere. CBD water at my 7-Eleven, my Kroger is full of CBD infused items, even though the Food and Drug Administration says they're not supposed to. For the Michigan State Police to try and arbitrarily determine that everything before a certain date is legitimately prosecuted and everything after might be questionable certainly ignores the fact that our society is full of CBD products that could be affecting us, whether it's a foodstuff or whether it's just a health supplement. Let's not forget that oftentimes CBD is taken, through the digestive system, which could enter the bloodstream and potentially trigger these false positives. So as an attorney, I'm sure you have a very very good way to defeat some kind of arbitrary date that the MSP tries to pull out of their behinds in order to save themselves from having 30,000 instead of just 3,000 cases.
Right, exactly. I think, the THC, to the extent that weighed in on the determination by juries dating back 20 years, they're all up for reversal in my view. And this March 28th, 2019 date is really an arbitrary date that I think they're just trying to mitigate their damages there.
Right.
But I don't think that should apply. CBD's been around a long time, and yeah, it's everywhere. Health food stores and 7-Elevens, like you said.
Gas stations,
people-
you name it, right?
It has been since
Yeah.
California legalized in 96. So you can't really even go back a certain number of years and say this was simply not available commercially. It's been shipped by, across state lines forever.
Right. Even dating back before the National Farm Bill, 2014, when it
Right.
federally became legal, industrial hemp, that is, as long as it contained 0.3% of THC or less. But even before that, CBD has been around, and we all saw the compelling program of Charlotte's Web,
Charlotte Figge.
with Dr. Sanjay Gupta and all that, where CBD was so helpful to that child with her seizure conditions. And that was just one of many, many cases where CBD has been helping people going way back to before 2000.
And Jamie, I know your son uses CBD products to help him, right?
Absolutely. And it's helped tremendously. CBD and a mixture of CBG is typically what we use. CBG helps him a bit with the focus. And, it's a matter of finding that right sweet spot for him. But to my understanding, I thought that our bodies naturally produced cannabinoids and CBD, possibly, specifically in breast milk. Is that not the case? Because I'm pretty sure that's true. But if that's the case, could just people in general that might not be consuming, like maybe a pregnant woman or a breastfeeding woman, could they be getting popped with something like this?
Right. When I've seen it described, they sort of give it this endo in front of it as though it's that inside of the body. Our endocannabinoid systems have cannabinoids as it is. So I don't know if they can tell the difference between those that are naturally occurring in our endocannabinoid system, and that sometimes there's a cannabinoid deficiency that might cause a seizure, and that's why we need to augment it with the appropriate cannabinoid. But yeah, that's a good point.
This does imply that there are several programs right now in Michigan that need to come to a screeching halt, including Child Protective Services testing parents for THC, or testing children for THC. If you don't know that that's not a cannabidenial, then you just can't. The other thing is the oral swab testing roadside impairment program. If you can't verify those tests with a blood test that MSP can verify, then the oral swabs are completely useless. The fact is you can't use them in a court situation unless a blood test has confirmed it. So, those programs should be immediately suspended. And I'm sure there are other ones too that I'm not aware of that should probably just grind to an immediate halt until we get this sorted out. Tom, is that an overreach, or do you think that's fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. Even probation, we've had clients come in and say, "Oh, I got violated, but all I took was CBD," and they've ended up back in jail. That happens all the time. And,
so what is
patient trying to heal himself?
What's kind of the next steps? I know the MSP and probably the Attorney General are trying to figure all this out right now, but what do you think are next steps, Tom, other than completely halting this? Then what? So
right. Well, I would hope that prosecuting attorneys are attorneys, and they're held to an ethical standard. And so if they're aware of 3,250 cases that have been have presented false testimony, really, they should initiate bringing them out. But I'm sure that defense attorneys will be the ones who will be bringing actions to reverse these charges. And, there could even be actions for malicious prosecution because of this broad-based error that's occurred that really should have been caught earlier.
So there's a lot of people in jail right now that could be released from jail because of this. Would that be an overstatement?
No, I don't think that is an overstatement at all.
I know some people avoided jail by taking a plea bargain, and the plea bargain was predicated on the fact that the prosecutor told them that if they went to trial with all this THC evidence that they had, that they would suffer the full consequence. Eric Van Dusen discussed a case where someone had been given an offer of 5 years non-jailable probation, as opposed to, if you want to go to court and we take it all the way, I'm going to put you behind bars for 15 years. So that THC evidence was used as a lever in order to to force that person to accept responsibility for something they didn't feel that they were responsible for. So it might be incredibly difficult for prosecutors to chase down all the different cases in which this THC confusion actually affected the outcome, Tom, right?
Exactly. And those plea deals should be reversed because they were coerced with false evidence. And that's a very common occurrence, where they're forced to take a plea and they're looking at, multiple years in jail, and they're looking at these lab results and how impacting that could be to a jury, and they're not wanting to take the risk, so they take the plea, and to no fault of their own, they end up with a record when really they shouldn't have. So these records need to be cleaned. In fact, it should be a mass cleaning of everybody's records. They could do it with the software and just make it happen automatically.
I was watching Jazz Cabbage Cafe yesterday, where the whole idea of legislative expungement came up. That was on your show, Rick. I'll talk a little bit about that thought.
Well, of course, we know that the expungement of crimes for cannabis, alcohol, or other causes was initiated by the legislature. The legislature gave a little bit more freedom to expunge to some crimes than it gave to others, and it really didn't give a whole lot of freedom to expunge to the cannabis crimes. It's possible that with this new evidence, we could get the legislature perhaps to throw a bill together and pass it out of the House and the Senate. It would require a 3/4 supermajority, but you could potentially amend what you've already done for expungement to make these automatic expungements, or to force county prosecutors to undergo a record search. The one thing that I think is really a problem is that I doubt prosecutors in some of these smaller communities, smaller counties that don't have a lot of resources, are going to dig back through 3, 5, 10, 20 years worth of records to try and find every instance where this may have potentially occurred, unless a law requires them to do so, and that law would be passed by the lawmakers and the legislature. It's very difficult to imagine the Republican-dominated House and Senate would pass something that would punitively address the Michigan State Police the way that they probably should. It's just not been their case, their history rather. But man, that would be the best way to do it, right? That way everybody doesn't have to hire an attorney, do their own thing. It would just be handled.
Right. And most of those driving under the influence of drug cases are not eligible for expungement. If you have a first offense, you get one under the new law. But what about the second or third, or maybe all three? He was only taking CBD. They should all be reevaluated.
I can sure imagine a circumstance where someone gets busted and they're like, I have no idea why they got me for this, because all I ever did was CBD, but I'm told CBD can't trigger these tests. So, well, I'm just going to continue to live my life. And then they get busted a second time and still can't figure it out because they're told CBD cannot trigger these tests. Right. And maybe end up with a third through no fault of their own, because they're just listening to what the physicians tell them. Physicians tell them we can't trigger these positive tests. And then it turns out that's just false. And Tom, the accusation that the reagents involved are the real criminals here, and not the Michigan State Police Crime Lab that didn't detect their own error for decades. That rings hollow, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, they're accredited and they don't have a simple checks and balance like this. They could have taken they could have gone up to the gas station and grabbed the little CBD and done that just 20 years ago. So it's just really, really no excuse. And I've gotten numerous phone calls from crying mothers in the hospitals, and the social workers are accusing them of THC, that they found THC in the mother's blood and this and that. And, the threat of losing their child to CPS. I mean, it's horrifying. And they should have never gone through this. And I've had them tell me, I all I've taken was CBD. All I've taken is CBD. I don't know how this happened. So here it is. And it's
now,
just...
could the Michigan State Police actually be sued? I don't know whether I'm not a lawyer, so I'm asking you.
Immunity.
While government immunity is a huge, broad shield and very difficult to overcome, it should be explored.
But who would be the target of that suit? Would it be the lab technicians? Because the officer on the street's only doing what he's told.
Well,
Supervision doesn't know the tests are bad, then everybody's acting in good faith, even though it's a bad result, though, Tom, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a very difficult hurdle to overcome with government immunity. Maybe a malicious prosecution could be somehow made out, but it's a tough hurdle to jump.
It seems to me there's a common ingredient around inappropriate lab testing behavior between two different labs that's been in the news a lot lately, and that ingredient is Michigan State Police.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, part of the problem with the Veritas lab scandal was the use of Greg Machad, who used to be the Michigan State Police head forensic crime lab guy, and he was embroiled in a huge test result fixing scheme when he was at the MSP in regards to the results from cannabis concentrates, and he colluded with prosecutors in order to deliver results that made it easier for them to get convictions in court. Eric Van Dusen reveals that the way this whole story broke was not from a press release the MSP gave out or for some briefing that they gave to everybody. They verbally told the Prosecuting Attorneys Association that this was coming, so that those people had a heads up before everybody else, including the Criminal Defense Association of Michigan or any of the media persons. That implies a too close relationship between prosecutors and cops. And we really should take the whole lab thing right away from the Michigan State Police and use outside sourcing so that we can actually have confidence in those results again.
Yes, I agree. And we have lots of licensed labs here in Michigan now.
About 20 or so, I think, right?
Right.
And there are other labs,
safety compliance facilities.
Right.
and there are other labs that typically test blood. They could do this too. According to the Michigan State Police, they could easily just switch the machines and use a different type of test and have completely reliable results. But they've just resisted changing those machines for a long time, even when other police agencies around them recognized that those machines were no longer valuable, and they changed them instead. So.
Yeah, we should be independent, and especially after this black eye in the eyes of, the people of the state of Michigan, we deserve that clear demarcation, that separation and independence of the laboratory at this point. They had their chance and they blew it. So it's always appeared that they were too close to the prosecutors, and now this comes along and it's as if they've been handing these cases over to the prosecutors, whether they didn't know it or not. That's the state of affairs. So something has to change to restore the confidence in the judicial system, which is a crucial part of any judicial system. And they have a long way to go in doing that at this point, and changing to an independent lab would be a good move in that direction.
Yeah, for instance, when I get my annual physical, I get a blood draw that goes through the University of Michigan labs. I mean, that would be, I'm not saying they should be the sole exclusive one, but I mean, that's just a for instance, where there's a lot of availability out there at places like the U of M Medical Center and other places, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. Lots of ways in which that work could be reassigned to others. Here in Michigan, we have a wonderful, excess of technology. We have awesome facilities here in our state. Why we would not utilize them, why we would have our own crime lab for Michigan State Police is crazy. You know, the only other place that has a crime lab in Michigan that I know of, Tom, Oakland County.
Mhm.
And those people have a really bad reputation with questionable reporting of test results too, don't you think?
Yes. So there you go. The lack of independence is a problem. And it's not only an appearance of impropriety. Here we have it. It's actual impropriety. One leads to the other. And now having this actual impropriety, the appearance of impropriety is just blatant, and you know, people have lost faith in the judiciary. And you ask any judge, and they'll tell you how important that is to maintain in the eyes of the public. So a drastic change is due, and what overdue, 20 years.
Look at the black eye the Supreme Court of the United States of America took from the Roe v. Wade decision, where it was settled law for decades. And then all of a sudden they just pulled the rug out for what certainly seems to be political purpose. The incorruptibility of the courts was once a given. That's just what you were taught in school. Courts are above all this politics bullshit. Well, we're finding out that that's completely and utterly untrue in 2022.
Right. Absolutely. And that black eye to the Supreme Court, I agree. It's huge. And, you know, we don't know how far they're going to take this. If their reasoning was that they're doing away with the penumbra, which means the reading between the lines of the Constitution to interpret the Constitution and what it means. And here they are taking away rights that we've enjoyed. We're going in the wrong direction. In a progressive democracy, we're supposed to be adding rights, not taking away rights that we've had. What are they going to do? Yeah, last I checked, cruel and unusual punishment did not include whipping slaves at the point when our Constitution was passed. So are we going back to that? Or, you know, this could have, it's absurd what they're doing with the US Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe versus Wade.
So what do the other states do in this area? Again, I think Rick, I can do it, made reference to the fact that we're using Michigan State Police, but I mean, do other states use their state police, or do they use independent labs, or what do they do? You know?
I like it when you call me Mick Rick. That's cool.
I'm just drinking coffee, you know, so.
Yeah. But, you know, other states, to be honest with you, some of them use independent laboratories like we've talked about doing today. Other states have crime labs, but they have different systems for reporting or for verification. I think that it's possible to have a government-run crime lab, provided you have checks and balances. And one thing that we've known about here in Michigan for decades is that there's been a lack of checks and balances when it comes to our law enforcement community. You'll recall recently the controversy over allowing law enforcement agencies to get whatever they want from the U.S. military, including these giant MRAP, you know, trucks that are not even legal to drive on our city streets, and you know, bulletproof vests and high-powered stuff. So we don't really have checks and balances on law enforcement here in Michigan.
Yeah.
All right, so we're coming down towards the end of the show. Any final thoughts about how we can solve this problem, or the what next question I asked earlier?
Well, I think they need to acknowledge that this March 2019, March 28th, should not be a cutoff date. It's arbitrary. You know, I think I guess they're pointing to some bill that allegedly legalized CBD in Michigan, but it was actually legalized when industrial hemp was legalized. And even beyond that, given that it's been the THC that has been identifying identified as the intoxicating substance, that false positive delivered to a jury and persuading juries to convict people. That has nothing to do with whether CBD was legal or not. So this March 28th, 2019 date is arbitrary and capricious and is not the cutoff date at all. So
Are they just trying to limit their liability? Is that what you think?
I believe so. They're mitigating, you know, they put that number 3,250 cases. They need to put a 0 or 2 after that. Who knows?
I imagine you have a fair number of clients that are calling you right now saying, hey, how do we, deal with this, right?
Right. My partner here at Cannabis Counsel, Julia Gilbert, was recollecting a case in Jackson when she was a half hour into a cross-examination of the Michigan State Police forensic lab, questioning their methodologies, and Judge Phillip cut her off right in front of the jury and misled the jury into thinking that, oh, these test results are infallible. You know, why are you wasting the court's time? And Julia fought back and objected to that statement being made in front of the jury. And there's been all sorts of cases like that where the judges themselves have given such deference to these test results, and it's resulted in all kinds of not only convictions but pleas that have been coerced, and those records need to be cleaned.
Boy, this is going to drag on for a long time too. I mean, you're talking probably years to get all this sorted out, right?
Yes. Yeah. So we're digging through our files, and Cannabis Counsel is out there ready to take your case if you're listening and this has happened to you, for sure.
You can't
All right.
deconstruct a spider web. I mean, my gracious, there's just no way we'll catch everybody that should be alleviated. It's terrible.
Yeah. It's a travesty of justice.
All right. So you invited people to reach out to Cannabis Counsel, Tom. So now I'm giving you your opportunity to share whatever contact methods you want to give to everybody. Go ahead.
Yeah. Visit us at cannabiscounsel.com or on the phone at 313-446-ABLE. That's ABEL, or 446-2235. And our main email contact is info@cannabiscounsel.com. Give us a call and we'll be happy to reopen your case and seek justice on your behalf. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Let's go to Jamie Cooper now on all those events. Where's the best place to find out about more of those events?
Yeah, just go to cincymag.com/Michigan. On that page, you can also read our cover story about the Hemp Buyer Collective and 73-year-old Judy Porter, who hopefully you guys got to meet her at Cantina a couple of weeks ago. And by the way, I'll be posting some of our pictures in our video from Cantina over the next couple of days. They were great. It took me back. I wish we could do that more often than just once a year, but yeah. cincymag.com/Michigan. And we still do a virtual speed networking event every other week, every other Wednesday. Our next one is next week on Wednesday at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Just go to connects.cincymag.com.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, AKA Mick.
Mick Rick, yes. So I will be at High Profile in Weberville this Friday, doing a personal appearance on behalf of Redemption Cannabis. We have there's so many things coming up. Jamie Cooper talked about all the different events that are going on. Big Clouds coming up. I will be a judge for that Goats of Cannabis, where Burner and Cheech and everybody else will be there. So
me too.
That'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a good time. You can always reach me at minorml.org. Take a look at the website, hit our contact button, or you can find me at any of the socials. But really, instead of contacting me, contact your House rep and your senator, because the last half of 2022, I fear, is going to be filled with a lot of cannabis hate coming from people seeking office. And there'll be a lot of misinformation thrown out about cannabis, just as Tom Lavigne described, a false date coming from the Michigan State Police designed to limit their liability. Get active. These last few months before the election that we have coming up, this is super important. Don't call me, call them.
And we should probably do a show here soon, maybe this month, about the cannabis friendly folks running for office in the state of Michigan, to give them a little love. Obviously, there's a lot of folks on the other side, we won't name those folks, that are not giving the love. So we should probably help those folks out, make sure they get elected. And I think that'd be a great show. What do y'all think?
I dig it.
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
great.
All right. So I'm sorry about I had I don't know if it's related to the power failure, but we changed codes, and apparently Dan Sparrow didn't get the correct code. So I've been texting him back and forth during the show. He says he's got a great review for next week. We'll make sure that I'll test the new Zoom code with him just to make sure he's got it, because I just changed it here right before the show. So anyway, my bad. But anyway, thanks for joining us today. We'll be back again next Wednesday. Don't know yet what we're going to be covering. I try to make it as topical as possible. Certainly, this is a very topical one. This just story just broke, last Thursday or Friday. And so this is the kinds of stuff that we like to explore. We're also open to your suggestions. If you got some stories, ideas out there that we have not pursued, let us know. We'll take a look at it. You can reach me at mike@mimarijuanareport.com.